"Daddy, it's my mommy," the little girl said, spotting a homeless woman on the street. When the billionaire sees the woman, he can't believe his eyes. Ellis Thompson stared at the numbers on his computer screen until they blurred together. 15 open spreadsheets, 3 reports to finish, and a mountain of unanswered emails. This had been his normal for 18 months. The clock on the wall read 3:42 p.m., earlier than he usually looked up from his work. A soft sound came from the hallway. Juny, dragging crayons across paper, humming softly to herself. Ellis rested his fingers on the keyboard, hesitating. He should finish the report before 5. The client was waiting. The company needed it. The bills wouldn't stop. But something about that children's song reached him in a way it hadn't in a very long time. Without a second thought, Ellis closed his laptop and stood up from his chair, feeling his back muscles protest after hours in the same position. He walked down the narrow apartment hallway, where the walls still held photos he didn't have the heart to take down, but couldn't bring himself to look at directly either. Juny was on the living room rug, surrounded by colorful papers, her brown hair falling over her face in a messy cascade that no one had combed that morning. She looked up when she sensed his presence. "Are you done with work, Dad?" she asked, surprise clear in her voice. The question hit him like a quiet blow. When had it become so unusual for him to appear in the living room before dusk? Guilt settled on his shoulders like a coat that was far too heavy. "I thought I'd take the rest of the afternoon off," Ellis replied, trying to sound casual. His eyes fell on the drawing she was making. 3 stick figures, a tall man, a woman with long hair, and a little girl in the middle, all holding hands. He quickly looked away. "Want to go out and get a bite to eat?" Juny's face transformed instantly. Her eyes, so much like her mother's, widened with almost uncontrollable excitement. She dropped her crayon as if it were on fire, like a real restaurant, not just ordering food on the phone. Her excitement was almost painful to witness. Ellis realized how long it had been since they had done anything normal together. Since the accident, his life had become an endless loop of work, apartment, more work. It was easier to bury himself in spreadsheets than to face Willa's absence in every corner of the house. Easier to bring food home in boxes than to sit at a table where someone would always be missing. Yes, a real restaurant, Ellis confirmed, forcing a smile. "Fuzz, how about that place with the strawberry milkshakes you used to like?" Juny practically flew off the floor, abandoning her drawings and crayons. "Can I wear my blue dress? Mommy always said it matches my eyes." Ellis felt the familiar tightness in his chest, that sharp pain that came every time Willa was mentioned. 18 months hadn't lessened it one bit. "Of course," he managed to say. "I'll wait for you here in 10 minutes." As Juny ran to her room, Ellis stood in the living room, staring at the abandoned drawing on the rug. A family, complete. The way they hadn't been for a long, long time. Mel's diner hadn't changed a bit. The same Formica tables, the same worn red leather booths, the same smell of French fries and fresh brewed coffee. Ellis hadn't set foot in here since before. It was Willa's favorite spot for Sunday lunches. The familiar pain returned, but Ellis pushed it away, focusing on Juny's illuminated face. "Can we sit by the window?" "Please." She bounced beside him, her blue dress twirling with her movements. For a girl of only 8, Juny carried a shadow in her eyes that shouldn't have been there. But today, that shadow was temporarily chased away by excitement. "Of course we can." The waitress led them to a booth by the large window. Ellis recognized her. Martha, the same one who used to bring extra lollipops for Juny when they came as a family. She smiled at them with a mixture of joy and poorly disguised pity. "Long time no see, Ellis, and look how little Juny has grown." Juny smiled, showing off a gap where a baby tooth had recently fallen out. A milestone Willa would never see. "I lost a tooth last week," she announced proudly. "Wow, that deserves an extra large milkshake, don't you think?" Martha winked, handing them the menus. "The usual for you two." Ellis was surprised she remembered after all this time. "Yes, please." When Martha walked away, Juny opened the menu anyway, looking at the colorful pictures of the dishes, as if she were seeing a treasure. "You know we already ordered, right?" Ellis asked, watching her with a softness he hadn't felt in a long time. "I know, I just like looking at the pictures." She turned the page, pointing to a giant sundae. "Mommy always said we'd order this one day, but only when I was big enough to help finish it." Ellis swallowed hard. Willa had promises like that, little milestones for a future that would never come. One day they would go camping. One day they would visit Disney. One day. "Maybe we can order it next time," he offered, surprising himself with his own suggestion. There was a next times in the promise, something he hadn't allowed himself to think about for months. Juny's eyes lit up. She put down the menu and began to tell him about school, the words flowing in a quick, excited rush, as if she had months of conversations stored up inside her. Ellis realized how much he had missed by pulling away. How much of his daughter's life was happening without him truly noticing. The food arrived, burgers, crispy French fries, and 2 strawberry milkshakes, one regular and one extra large for the brave young lady, as Martha announced. Juny dug in with the typical enthusiasm of her age, ketchup smearing the corner of her mouth. For the first time in a long time, Ellis found himself truly present, not thinking about work, not dwelling on memories, but right there, in that moment, with his daughter. It was a strangely new and old feeling at the same time. It was halfway through the meal that the mood shifted. Juny had just finished telling a funny story about her science teacher when, suddenly, her gaze fell upon the empty seat beside them, where Willa used to sit. "Daddy, I miss Mommy so much." Her voice was low, heavy with a sadness too large for her small shoulders. I wish she was here with us." Ellis felt his own heart clench. He reached out and covered Juny's small hand with his. His smile was sad, but there was a genuine attempt at comfort in it. "I miss her too, sweetie." What else could he say? That he sometimes still woke up in the middle of the night believing she would be sleeping beside him. That he avoided certain streets in the city because the memories were unbearable. That there were nights her absence was so palpable he could barely breathe. Instead, he squeezed his daughter's hand gently. She deserved more than a father who hid behind his work. The realization hit him hard. He had failed not only Willa's memory but also the daughter who was still here, needing him. "Hey," Ellis said, trying to soften the moment. "I think Martha put extra fudge on your milkshake." It worked. The smile returned to Juny's face, albeit a little more subdued. They finished their meal talking about light things, the book she was reading, the new game she wanted, plans for the weekend that, for the first time in a long while, Ellis was actually considering spending with her. The afternoon sun was beginning to set as they left the restaurant, painting the sky in orange hues that reflected off the windows of the buildings. The air was warm and pleasant, with a light breeze that rustled Juny's blue dress. Ellis was surprised to find he felt lighter, not happy. Happiness still seemed like too distant a concept, but less submerged in the grief that had been his constant companion. Juny walked beside him, holding his hand, telling him about a science project she was planning. "I'm going to build a volcano, but I don't want to do it like everyone else, you know. The teacher said we can be creative." "And what do you have in mind?" Ellis asked, genuinely interested. "I thought I'd make the volcano transparent, so people can see what happens inside. Mommy always said it was important to see how things work." She skipped beside him, excited about her idea. Ellis smiled, remembering how Willa used to take everything apart, remote controls, clocks, even the blender once. "How you get your curiosity from her, no doubt." They were walking down a quiet commercial street, colorful shop windows on one side, parked cars on the other, a few blocks from home, a route they hadn't taken together in a very long time. Ellis could almost feel Willa's presence there, in the places they used to frequent as a family. It was in that moment that it happened. Juny stopped so abruptly that Ellis almost tripped over her. Her small body went rigid, her eyes fixed on something across the street. For a second, Ellis thought she had seen a dog or an interesting window display. Then he saw her expression. Juny's face had transformed into a mask of shock and disbelief. Her eyes widened, bright with an emotion so intense it seemed impossible for her small body to contain. Her mouth fell open, trembling. "Daddy, it's my mommy!" The words hit Ellis like a physical blow. He followed his daughter's gaze, his body turning slowly, confusion and alarm mixing in his mind. Across the street, sitting on the sidewalk against a graffiti-covered wall, was a woman. Dark, tangled hair fell over a thin, dirty face. Worn, torn clothes hung from her frail frame. She was staring at the ground, her arms wrapped around her knees, the perfect picture of desolation. Ellis's first instinct was irritation. How could Juny mistake a stranger, possibly a homeless person, for her mother? He was about to gently explain the mistake when something stopped him. Her profile, the curve of her neck, the way she held her knees. The world around Ellis seemed to slow down. The city sounds, horns, conversations, footsteps, all faded into a distant, muffled hum. His heart began to pound so hard he could feel the pulse in his ears. Impossible. It was impossible. And yet, Willa. The name escaped his lips before he could stop it, a hoarse, incredulous whisper. As if she had heard him, though he had spoken far too quietly, the woman raised her head. Her eyes met Ellis's across the distance, through the parked cars and passing pedestrians. Those eyes, blue as a summer sky. The same eyes Ellis knew better than his own, the same ones he had first seen 15 years ago in a university library, the same ones he had watched close forever on a cold slab in a morgue. For a fleeting instant, something flickered in that gaze. A flash of recognition, perhaps, of confusion, of fear. Ellis didn't realize he was crossing the street until the angry honk of a swerving car. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered except getting to her, touching her, confirming he wasn't hallucinating. "Willa," he called again, approaching carefully, as if she were an apparition that might dissolve into thin air. "That's me, Ellis." The woman shrank back against the wall, her eyes now wide with panic. There was something wild in that look, something wounded and afraid. "No." The voice was hoarse, different from the one Ellis remembered, but still. "You're mistaken. My name is Anne." Anne, not Willa. Ellis felt the world spin around him, reality distorting like a nightmare. It was impossible. Willa was dead. He had been there. He had identified the body. He had walked the casket to the cemetery. He had held her cold hand one last time. And yet, it was her. It was her, right there, alive, breathing, looking at him with Willa's eyes, even if she didn't recognize him. "Mommy!" Juny's voice cut through the air. She was running towards them, her blue dress fluttering, her face a mixture of joy and confusion. Panic seized the woman. In a sudden, desperate movement, she scrambled to her feet, swaying slightly. Her eyes darted from Ellis to Juny, wide and bewildered. Before anyone could react, she turned and bolted down the sidewalk, moving with a surprising speed for someone who looked so frail. "Wait!" Ellis yelled, taking a few steps in the direction she had gone, but the woman had already disappeared into the crowd of pedestrians, turning a corner, leaving only the ghost of her presence and the impossible certainty in Ellis's heart. Juny grabbed his hand, her eyes filled with tears and confusion. "Why did Mommy run away, Daddy? Why didn't she recognize me?" Ellis knelt to her level, holding her small shoulders, trying to find words to explain something he didn't understand himself. How could he tell his daughter they'd just seen a ghost? How could he admit that the woman they had both buried seemed to be alive, but didn't remember them? "Juny, Ellis began, his voice failing him. "I don't know what happened, but we're going to find out, I promise." Juny's eyes, so like Willa's, stared up at him full of hope and fear. It was her, wasn't it? "I'm not crazy." "No, sweetie," Ellis answered, feeling something break and rebuild inside him at the same time. "You're not crazy. It looked a lot like her." He hugged his daughter against his chest, feeling her tremble slightly. Over Juny's shoulder, Ellis stared in the direction the woman had disappeared, his mind racing with impossible possibilities. If that really was Willa, How could she be alive? And if she was alive, why didn't she recognize them? Why did she seem so scared, so lost? In that moment, holding his daughter on a busy sidewalk on an ordinary afternoon, Ellis knew his life had changed forever, all over again. The grief he had carried for 18 months was now transforming into something different. A search, a mission, a desperate hope. His dead wife had just run away from him, and Ellis would not rest until he found her again and uncovered the truth behind those frightened eyes. Ellis didn't sleep that night. How could he? Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face, dirty, scared, but unmistakably the face of the woman he had buried 18 months ago. The woman who, according to every official document, every medical certificate, every logical reality, was supposed to be dead. He spent hours on the internet searching for cases of people wrongly declared dead. He found bizarre stories, patients waking up on autopsy tables, accident victims turning up years later with no memory, but nothing that explained how Willa could be alive when he himself had identified her body, or had he identified the wrong person? The question tormented him. The accident had been severe, the body was... Ellis closed his eyes, pushing the memory away. No, it was her he had seen in the morgue. He was sure, almost sure. When the first ray of sun peeked through the window, Ellis was already on his feet, determined. He opened his bedside table drawer and pulled out a yellowed envelope he hadn't touched in months. Inside were dozens of photos, portraits of a life that had ended abruptly. With trembling hands, he selected a specific one, him and Willa smiling on their front porch. Juny still a baby in her arms, the last birthday they had celebrated together as a family. "Dad?" Juny's sleepy voice came from the doorway. She was in her pajamas, her hair messy, her eyes still puffy from sleep and the tears of the previous night. "Are you going to look for Mommy today?" Ellis quickly put the other photos back in the envelope, but kept the chosen one in his hand. "I'm going to try, sweetie. Can I come with you?" There was a plea in her eyes that nearly broke Ellis. "Not this time." He approached her, kneeling to her level. "I need to talk to her first, explain some things. If everything goes well, I promise you'll see her soon." Juny nodded, trying to look mature, but her bottom lip trembled slightly. "What if she doesn't want to see us? What if she doesn't remember us forever?" Ellis swallowed hard. The same question had tormented him all night. "We'll take this one step at a time, okay? First, we need to find her again." The search began early. Ellis left Juny with their neighbor, Mrs. Patel, an elderly Indian woman who had always been kind to them. "Urgent work matters," was the excuse he gave. How could he explain the truth? How could he say he was looking for a wife that everyone, including himself until yesterday, believed to be dead? He drove slowly through the streets near where they had seen Willa. Parking lots, alleys, parks, places where homeless people often took shelter, with every unfamiliar face, a mix of relief and disappointment. It was close to noon when Ellis spotted her. She was sitting on a bench in the small city park, staring into space, wearing the same worn clothes from the day before. She looked even more fragile in the daylight. Ellis parked the car and took a deep breath, his heart racing. The photo in his shirt pocket felt like it weighed a ton. He walked slowly toward the bench, trying not to startle her. She noticed his approach when he was just a few feet away. Her eyes widened with recognition and fear. For a moment, Ellis thought she would run again. "Please," he said quickly, holding up his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to talk." The woman, Willa, Anne, whoever she was, hesitated. She looked ready to bolt at any moment, but something kept her seated. Curiosity, perhaps, or exhaustion. "You mistook me for someone else yesterday," she said, her voice low and hoarse. "I already told you my name is Anne." Ellis nodded, approaching slowly until he was 2 steps from the bench. "May I sit?" she shrugged, wary, but didn't refuse. Ellis took that as a yes and sat on the opposite end of the bench, maintaining a respectful distance. Up close, the resemblance was even more striking. Despite the dirt, the disheveled hair, The deep, dark circles under her eyes, it was Willa. The same intense blue eyes, the same face shape, the same tiny, almost invisible scar above her left eyebrow. The result of a bicycle fall at age 12, as she always used to tell it. Why are you looking at me like that?" she asked, uncomfortable. Ellis blinked, realizing he had been staring. "Sorry." He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "It's just that you look so much like someone I knew." "Your wife?" It wasn't a question. "The little girl called me Mom." Ellis nodded, his throat suddenly dry. "She passed away." "Is that it?" "That's what I thought," Ellis answered honestly. "There was an accident 18 months ago." The woman frowned, processing the information. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes, a flash of, what? Recognition. Pain. "I'm sorry," she said finally, looking away. "But I'm not her. I don't know you or that child." Ellis took a deep breath. It was now or never. Slowly, so as not to scare her, he took the photograph from his pocket. "I just want you to see this. After that, if you want me to leave, I will." He held the photo out to her. She took it hesitantly, her fingers trembling slightly. What happened next would be etched in Ellis's memory forever. Her face transformed as she looked at the image. Her eyes widened. Her mouth formed a small O of surprise. The color drained from her cheeks. Her free hand slowly rose to cover her lips, as if trying to stifle a cry. "That's me." The words came out in a nearly inaudible whisper. Tears began to well in her eyes, streaming silently down her dirty cheeks. "That's me in the photo." Ellis felt his own heart race. He wanted to touch her, to hold her, but he knew he couldn't move. This moment was too fragile. "Yes," he confirmed softly. "It's you, Willa Thompson, my wife, Juny's mother." She shook her head, confused and scared, but she couldn't tear her eyes from the photograph. "It can't be. I don't remember. I don't..." Her hands were shaking so much the photo almost fell. "Who am I?" The question was so simple and so devastating that Ellis felt his own eyes burn. "Your name is Willa Marie Thompson. We have an 8-year-old daughter, Juny. You're an architect. You were an architect. We met in college. We've been married for 10 years. Each word seemed to hit her like a physical blow. Willa, because it was her, there was no longer any doubt, clutched the photo to her chest, as if trying to absorb it. "I don't remember," she murmured, her voice choked. "I don't remember any of this." "It's okay," Ellis said, his own voice trembling. "We'll figure out what happened. Together." They sat in silence for a few minutes, the weight of the situation settling over them. Ellis watched as Willa looked repeatedly at the photo, touching the faces printed on the paper, as if she could draw out memories through contact. "You must be hungry," he said finally. "We could get something to eat if you want. No pressure. Just talk." Willa hesitated, her eyes still fixed on the photograph. She seemed to be fighting an internal battle. Finally, she gave a slight nod. "Okay." The small cafe was nearly empty at that hour. Ellis chose a table in the back, away from prying eyes. Willa sat rigidly, looking around suspiciously, like a cornered animal searching for escape routes. Neither of them spoke while they waited. The silence wasn't exactly comfortable, but there was a mutual understanding there. They both needed time to process what was happening. Willa ordered only a soup and a tea. She ate slowly, methodically, as if she wasn't used to full meals. Ellis barely touched his sandwich, unable to feel hungry in the face of the surreal situation. "How long?" she began, hesitant. "How long has it been since you thought I was dead?" 18 months. The accident was in January of last year." Willa frowned, thoughtful. "I don't remember anything before about 16 months ago. I woke up in a hospital in another city. No ID, no memories. The doctors said I had suffered a head trauma." Ellis felt a chill. The timeline matched. What happened after? Willa shrugged, her gaze distant. The hospital kept me for a few weeks. No one was looking for me. No identity, no insurance. I ended up on the streets. I survived. People started calling me Anne, and I took the name. It was better than having none at all. The pain in her voice was palpable. Ellis fought the urge to reach out and take her hand. How did you get here, to this city? I'm not sure. I just kept moving. One place looks like another when you live like that. She paused, her eyes suddenly sharp. How can I be sure you're telling the truth, that I'm really this person? The question was valid, Ellis thought for a moment. There's a way to be sure. We can go to a hospital, run some tests, verify your identity. I have all your documents, medical records. Willa recoiled slightly, apprehensive. A hospital. Just for a checkup, Ellis assured her. We can find out what happened to you, why you can't remember, and maybe we can start to get your memories back. She looked at the photo, which she hadn't let go of since Ellis gave it to her. What if I'm not who you think I am? What if I'm just someone who looks a lot like her? Then I'll apologize for the trouble and get on with my life, Ellis answered honestly. But that's not what you believe, is it? You felt something when you saw this photo. Willa didn't answer right away. Her fingers traced the outline of the face in the image, her own face, smiling and healthy. I felt like I was looking through a window into someone else's life. A life that feels like it should be mine, but I can't reach it. She looked up, meeting his eyes. Let's go to the hospital. Mercy General Hospital was bustling, as always. Ellis held the door for Willa, who entered hesitantly, visibly uncomfortable with the bright lights and the smell of antiseptic. Explaining the situation at the front desk was complicated. The nurse looked at them with skepticism as Ellis tried to summarize the impossible. That his wife, officially dead for over a year, was standing right in front of him, alive but with no memories. It took showing his ID, Willa's death certificate, and making a few calls before they were led to an examination room. Dr. Chen, a middle-aged neurologist with kind eyes and a serious expression, listened to the entire story without interrupting. This is an extraordinary situation, she commented finally, looking from Ellis to Willa. We'll need to run some tests to understand what happened. A CT scan, an MRI, blood work. And we'll need to verify your identity for certain. Willa nodded silently. She seemed smaller, more fragile under the hospital lights. The next few hours were a blur of exam rooms, whirring machines, needles, and forms. Ellis waited outside for most of the procedures, his mind spinning with possibilities and questions. How was this possible? Who had he buried, if not Willa? How did she survive the accident that supposedly killed her? And most importantly, could her memories ever come back? Finally, Dr. Chen called them into her office. Willa looked exhausted, but there was a new determination in her eyes. The preliminary results are intriguing, the doctor began, opening a file with the scans. First, the fingerprints confirm it. This is Maki's, without a doubt, Willa Thompson. Ellis let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding, even though he already knew the official confirmation was different. As for her medical condition, Dr. Chen continued, there is clear evidence of an old cranial trauma, consistent with the time of the accident. The CT scan shows scarring on the temporal lobe, an area often associated with memory. Is that why I can't remember? Willa asked, her voice small. It's consistent with a diagnosis of severe retrograde amnesia caused by trauma. Essentially, your mind blocked everything that came before the trauma as a protective mechanism. The doctor adjusted her glasses. Samis, what intrigues me is how you were declared dead. I'll need to review the records from the accident. Ellis felt a chill. I identified the body. It was her. At least, I thought it was. Dr. Chen looked at him with sympathy. Severe accidents can make identification difficult, Mr. Thompson, and emotional shock affects our judgment. What happens now? Willa asked, still clutching the photo Ellis had given her like a talisman. I strongly recommend regular psychological and neurological follow-up. The good news is, there's no permanent structural damage that would prevent memory recovery. With time, exposure to familiar environments, and proper therapy, you may regain some or even all of your memories. Some? Ellis asked, apprehensive. Memory is complex, Mr. Thompson. We can't guarantee a full recovery, but there's a good chance, especially with family support. Family. The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Ellis thought of Juny, waiting at home, anxious for news. How long will it take? Willa asked, her voice firmer now. Impossible to predict. It could be gradual. Small flashes at first, then more substantial memories. Or it could happen all at once, triggered by a specific stimulus. Dr. Chen closed the file. The important thing now is not to push. Let the memories return naturally. Ellis nodded, taking it all in. And what about the legal situation? She's officially dead. That will require legal proceedings to reverse the declaration of death. I can provide all the necessary medical documentation. When they left the office, Ellis and Willa stopped in the hallway. The reality of the situation finally setting in. She was alive. It was really her. But she didn't remember him, or Juny, or anything about her previous life. What do you want to do now? Ellis asked softly. Willa looked at the photo in her hands, then at Ellis. I think I want to meet my daughter. Properly this time. The drive home was silent. Ellis drove slowly, occasionally glancing to his side, as if afraid Willa might disappear at any moment. She stared out the window, absorbing the city she was supposed to recognize but which felt strangely new. Juny's waiting, Ellis said finally, as they parked in front of the house. She's very excited, but also scared. Willa nodded, a visible lump in her throat. I don't know how to act. I don't know how to be a mother. No one expects you to know right now. Just be gentle with her. And with yourself. The front door opened before they reached the porch. Juny was standing there, her eyes wide, her body stiff with anticipation. When she saw Willa, her face lit up with a hope so pure it hurt to look at. "Mommy," she exclaimed, taking a step forward, but then stopping, uncertain. Willa froze, looking at the little girl who was her daughter but felt like a stranger. Ellis placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, a silent gesture of support. "Hi, Juny," Willa managed to say, her voice trembling. Juny looked from Willa to Ellis, understanding slowly dawning on her young face. "She still doesn't remember me, does she, Daddy?" The question was so direct, so full of precocious maturity, that Ellis felt his heart clench. Not yet, my love," he answered, crouching to her level. "Mommy had an accident that affected her memory. It's going to take time for her to remember everything. But she's here now, and that's what matters." Juny nodded, processing the information. Then, to both their surprise, she took a small step forward and held out her hand to Willa. "That's okay. We can start over. My name is Juniper, but everyone calls me Juny. I'm 8.5 and I love to draw." Willa looked at the small, outstretched hand, her eyes welling with tears. Slowly, she reached out her own and gently shook it. "It's nice to meet you, Juny. I'm Willa." The name felt strange on her lips, like clothes that didn't quite fit. But it was a start. Ellis watched the moment, feeling a complex mix of emotions: joy, fear, hope, uncertainty. Nothing would be easy. The road ahead was filled with legal, medical, and emotional hurdles. But Willa was alive. She was home. And for the first time in 18 months, the future didn't feel like an endless void. Sunday morning brought a golden light that poured through the Thompsons' windows. Willa sat in the kitchen, a cup of tea cooling between her hands, watching the backyard through the glass door. It had been 4 days since she had returned to this house, to this life she couldn't remember as her own. 4 days of walking on eggshells, of cautious smiles and hopeful glances. Ellis had left early to get groceries, leaving her alone with Juny for the first time since they came back from the hospital. The girl was still asleep, giving Willa a moment of solitude to gather her thoughts. The house no longer felt as strange as it did on the first day. Small details were beginning to feel familiar: the way the third kitchen drawer always stuck, the specific creak of the 5th stair, the way the morning light hit that exact corner of the dining table. Willa heard a noise and looked up to see Juny standing in the kitchen doorway, still in her pajamas, her hair messy from sleep. The girl seemed hesitant, as if she didn't know exactly how to act now that they were alone. "Good morning," Willa said softly. "Want some juice? Ellis, your dad, left some in the fridge." Juny nodded, approaching slowly. Willa poured a glass and set it on the table. The girl sat down, taking small sips while watching Willa over the rim of the glass. The silence between them was delicate, filled with unsaid expectations. Since the emotional moment at the door when they'd arrived, Juny had kept a certain distance, as if she were evaluating this new version of her mother, trying to reconcile the woman she knew with the stranger, who now took her place. "Do you want to draw for a bit?" Willa suggested, searching for a way to connect. "I saw you have a lot of colored pencils in your room." Juny's eyes lit up slightly. "You want to draw with me?" "I'd love to." Minutes later, they were settled at the kitchen table, paper and colored pencils spread between them. Juny drew with intense concentration, her tongue stuck between her teeth, while Willa watched her, fascinated by this small, characteristic gesture. "What are you drawing?" Willa asked after a few minutes of comfortable silence. "Our garden," Juny replied without looking up. "That's how it used to be." Willa looked at the colorful drawing taking shape under the small hands, a simple house with a vibrant garden around it, flowers of every color, green bushes, and 3 smiling stick figures in the center. "It's very beautiful," Willa commented sincerely. "You draw very well for your age." Juny shrugged, but a slight blush colored her cheeks. "You always used to say I have an artist's eyes." There was a brief silence. The phrase floated between them like a delicate bubble, a fragment of a past only one of them remembered. Willa started her own drawing, letting her hand move freely across the paper. She was surprised to find herself drawing flowers. Lavender, she recognized, though she didn't know how she knew the exact shape of the long stems and the small clustered blossoms at the top. Without realizing it, she began to hum softly as she drew, a melody she didn't know where it came from, that emerged spontaneously like water from an underground spring. Soft, slow notes, almost a whisper. Juny froze, her pencil hovering over the paper. Her eyes widened, and she turned slowly toward Willa. That's my lullaby," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You used to sing it to me every night." Willa stopped abruptly, surprised at herself. "I didn't." "I don't know where that came from." The two looked at each other, a moment of mutual recognition hanging between them. Something had emerged from the depths of Willa's memory, something her conscious brain didn't recognize, but that her vocal cords remembered. "You remembered," Juny said, a spark of hope lighting up her face. "You remembered something about me." The hope in her eyes was almost painful to witness. Willa wasn't sure if she had truly remembered, or if it was just some muscle reflex, some memory stored in the body and not the mind. But the fragile joy on Juny's face was too precious to destroy. "Maybe," she replied carefully. "I don't remember it consciously, but something inside me seems to—" "Sing it again," Juny asked. And for the first time since Willa had returned, there was a pleading, open tone in her voice. Willa closed her eyes and let the melody return, humming softly. She didn't know the lyrics, if there were any, but the melody flowed naturally, as if her vocal cords knew the way even if her brain did not. When she opened her eyes, she saw Juny had moved closer, her large eyes fixed on Willa's face, studying every detail as if searching for signs of the mother she once knew. "You always stopped there," Juny commented, a note of sadness returning to her voice. "You'd say you forgot the rest of the words." Willa smiled, a genuine smile that surprised herself. "Some things don't change then." It was a small but significant moment, a fragile bridge across the chasm that separated them. They returned to their drawings, working side by side in a more comfortable silence now. Willa noticed how Juny would occasionally watch her from the corner of her eye, as if checking to see if her mother was still there, if the moment of connection hadn't been just her imagination. "Can we go outside?" Juny asked after a while. So I want to show you where the lavender you're drawing used to be. Of course, Willa agreed, intrigued by the fact that her drawing seemed to correspond to something real. They went out into the backyard, the grass still damp with morning dew. The garden was visibly neglected, with empty flower beds and plants in need of care, but there was still a worn beauty to the space. Father Lavender was all here, Juny explained, pointing to an area along the fence. You planted it when I was little because I had nightmares. You said the smell would chase away the bad dreams. Willa approached the empty beds, crouching to touch the soil. She closed her eyes, trying to connect with the space, trying to feel if any memory would surface. It was then that it happened. A flash, quick and intense like lightning. She was in this very garden, the late afternoon sun golden on the flower beds. There was the distinct sound of a child's laughter, Juny, younger, running with a watering can too big for her small hands. The scent of lavender filled the air, coming from blooming bushes planted along the fence. A sense of peace, of belonging so deep it ached. And then, as quickly as it came, the vision was gone, leaving Willa breathless, her hand clutching a handful of dirt. Did you see something? Juny asked, kneeling beside her, her face a mix of hope and concern. Your face changed. Willa nodded slowly, her heart racing. I think so. I saw you here watering the plants. There was lavender everywhere. It was beautiful. Juny's face lit up like a night sky suddenly filled with stars. It was real. That was a real day. You used to let me help even when I watered everything wrong and got soaking wet. The confirmation made Willa's heart race. She wasn't imagining it. It was a real memory, a genuine fragment of her past, small but hers. Dr. Chen said this might happen, Willa commented, more to herself than to Juny. Small flashes first. Does that mean you'll remember everything? Juny asked, hope evident in her voice. Will you remember me? The question, so direct and filled with vulnerability, struck Willa in the center of her chest. Juny had lost her mother once, and now she was living in the strange limbo of having her back physically, but still emotionally absent in many ways. I hope so, Willa answered honestly. I can't promise, but I'm going to try with all my might. Juny nodded, taking in the answer. Then, in a move that caught Willa by surprise, the girl leaned forward and hugged her, a quick, hesitant, but genuine hug. Let's replant the lavender, Juny suggested as she pulled away. Daddy said we can go to the garden center today. I'd like that very much, Willa replied, touched by the gesture. As they walked back to the house, Juny began telling stories about the garden, how she used to help plant seeds in the spring, how they sometimes had picnics there on weekends, how they used to pick fresh tomatoes in the summer. Willa listened, fascinated by these glimpses of the life she had led, of the mother she had been. It was strange to hear about herself as if she was someone else. And yet, there was something comforting in the normality of these memories, in the family routine they revealed. It was then that another image hit her, different from the first. Dark, frightening. The sound of tires screeching on asphalt, shattering glass, a suffocating sense of panic, of absolute fear that froze the blood in her veins. It wasn't the accident. At least it didn't seem to be. There was something more. Someone. A face she couldn't make out, but that sent waves of terror through her body. Willa stopped abruptly, her breath catching. Her heart was beating so hard she could feel it in her throat. Are you okay? Juny asked, alarmed, taking her hand. You just went pale. I'm fine, Willa lied, forcing a smile. Just a little dizzy. Maybe it's the sun. Juny studied her with those eyes that were too smart for her age. Did you remember something bad? The child's insight was unnerving. Willa hesitated, not wanting to lie to her, but also not wanting to scare her. I'm not sure, she answered honestly. Sometimes confusing images come, like pieces of a dream you can't quite put together. Juny nodded wisely. Daddy has nightmares sometimes. He shouts your name. The information hit Willa like a punch to the gut. The pain of that man, calling out in the dark for a wife he believed was dead. It was almost unbearable to imagine. "He's better now that you're back," Juny added quickly, as if she sensed she had said something upsetting. "He smiles more." Willa didn't know how to respond. The responsibility felt immense, not just to recover her own identity, but also to heal the wounds her absence had left in this family. The sound of a car parking interrupted the moment. Ellis had returned with the groceries. "Let's go help your dad with the bags," Willa suggested, grateful for the distraction. As they unloaded the car, Willa watched Ellis and Juny interact. The small inside jokes, the way they moved around each other with a familiarity developed during the months she was gone. There was a whole life that had continued without her, adapting to her absence. "I found these lavender starters at the farmer's market," Ellis mentioned, handing Willa a small pot with purple plants. "I thought maybe, well, I remembered you always liked them." The gesture touched her deeply. He didn't push, didn't demand that she remember, just offered small bridges to the past, letting her cross them at her own pace. "Thank you," Willa replied, feeling a lump in her throat. "Juny was just showing me where the old ones used to be." Ellis smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his tired eyes. "So you too had a good morning, then?" "The best!" Juny exclaimed, practically bouncing around them. "Mommy remembered the garden. And she sang my song without even knowing it was my song." The use of the word mommy did not go unnoticed by Willa. It was the first time since her return that Juny had called her that directly, not just referring to her as mommy when speaking to Ellis. "That's wonderful," Ellis replied, his gaze meeting Willa's over Juny's head, a silent question there. Willa nodded slightly. It was just flashes, but yes, something is coming back. The hope on his face was almost as painful to see as Juny's. These two people had lost so much, and now they were clinging to any fragment of memory like shipwreck survivors to debris. After lunch, the three of them went to the garden to plant the lavender starters. It was a clear, mild day, perfect for working outdoors. Ellis brought out gardening tools, and Juny put on a small apron with pockets that, she said, Willa had made especially for her gardening adventures. They worked together, digging holes, preparing the soil, planting the fragile seedlings. There was something deeply therapeutic in the work, in the contact with the earth, in the shared purpose. "Like this?" Juny asked, showing Willa how she had planted one of the starters. "Perfect," Willa replied, surprised at the naturalness of the praise, as if some part of her remembered what it was like to be a mother, even if her brain didn't recall the details. Ellis watched the interaction with a restrained smile, keeping slightly back, as if not wanting to interrupt the delicate bond forming between mother and daughter. When they finished, the three of them stood looking at the renewed flower bed, small patches of purplish blue contrasting with the dark earth. "It's going to be beautiful when it grows," Juny declared with satisfaction. "Yes, it will," Willa agreed, feeling a strange sense of accomplishment. It wasn't just the garden that was being replanted, she realized. It was an entire life. That night, as she was helping Juny get ready for bed, the girl asked shyly, "Can you sing to me?" "Like you used to," Willa nodded, sitting on the edge of the bed. She took a deep breath and let the melody emerge naturally. No words, just the soft humming that had surfaced earlier. Juny smiled, her eyes heavy with sleep. "You're coming back," she murmured, already half asleep. "You're coming back to us." Willa stayed there for a long time after Juny fell asleep, looking at the peaceful face of the child who was her daughter. A daughter she didn't remember raising, but whose heart still responded to her voice, her presence. Small connections, fragile threads weaving themselves between them again. It was a beginning that brought hope, but also questions about the accident, about the fear, about what had really happened in those final days before everyone's world fell apart. Questions that Willa was beginning to suspect might be more dangerous than anyone imagined. 2 weeks had passed since Willa had returned home. Small routines were beginning to establish themselves. Breakfast with Juny before school, Ellis leaving for work after hesitantly kissing Willa's forehead, afternoon walks through the neighborhood she didn't recognize, but that her feet seemed to know instinctively. The house no longer felt strange, Small objects evoked familiar feelings, even if not concrete memories. The doctors called it implicit memory, the body remembering what the conscious mind had forgotten, like her fingers knowing exactly where to find the wooden spoon in the kitchen drawer, or how she knew the bathroom doorknob needed to be pulled up while being turned. It was a Friday night. Juny was already asleep, exhausted after a week of school and the excitement of having her mother back. Ellis and Willa were in the living room, the comfortable silence broken only by the occasional crackle of the fireplace. Willa watched the flames, hypnotized by their sinuous movement. The nights were always harder. During the day, there were distractions, household chores, doctor's appointments, interactions with Juny. But at night, when the house fell silent, the unanswered questions grew louder in her mind. "What are you thinking about?" Ellis's soft voice brought her back to the present. She looked up, meeting his gaze. There was something so patient, so careful in the way he watched her, always attentive, never demanding more than she could give. "Everything and nothing," Willa replied with a small smile, "about how strange it is to feel both at home and like a visitor." Ellis nodded, understanding. "It must be confusing. It's like waking up in the middle of a movie you don't remember starting. All the other characters know what's going on, but you're trying to piece it all together." A silence settled between them, not uncomfortable but charged. There were so many unasked questions, so many postponed conversations. Since Willa had returned, they had focused on the present, on reintegration, on the practical aspects of the situation. The past, especially the time they were apart, was rarely mentioned. "Ellis?" Willa began, hesitant. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything," he replied, leaning forward slightly in his armchair. "You never asked me where I was all this time." "What happened to me after the accident?" His face tensed slightly, a shadow passing over his eyes. "I didn't want to push. I thought you would talk when you were ready." Willa nodded, appreciating his consideration, but she also realized the cost of that silence, the unasked questions she saw in his eyes when he thought she wasn't looking. "I don't remember much," she began, her eyes returning to the fire. "There's a big blank where the accident should be. The first clear memory I have is waking up in a hospital in Millfield." "Millfield?" Ellis repeated, surprised. "That's over 100 miles from here." "I know. The doctors there said I was found on the side of a back road, unconscious. No wallet, no ID." She paused, organizing the fragmented memories. "I had a severe concussion, a few broken ribs, and, obviously, I couldn't remember anything. Who I was, where I came from." Ellis listened intently, his body tense, as if each word were a small needle. "I was in the hospital for a few weeks. No one was looking for me. With no known insurance, no identity, they couldn't keep me indefinitely." Willa took a deep breath, getting to the hardest part. "When I was discharged, I had nowhere to go. I didn't know who I was. I had no money. I had nothing." Ellis closed his eyes for a moment, the pain evident on his face. "Meanwhile, I was here thinking I had buried you." The guilt in his voice was palpable. Willa reached out instinctively, touching his knee in a comforting gesture. "It wasn't your fault. How could you have known?" Ellis shook his head, unable to accept the absolution so easily. "Go on, please." "I ended up on the streets," Willa said simply. "At first, I slept in shelters when I could get a spot. Then I met some people, other homeless people who took me in. The memories of that period were vivid, contrasting with the void that preceded the accident. She remembered the biting cold of winter nights, the constant state of alert, her stomach aching with hunger. There was a group, 3 people, Maria, Leo, and an older man everyone called the captain, though I doubt that was his real name. A sad smile touched her lips. They found me sleeping on a park bench, shivering from the cold. They took me to their camp, under a bridge. They shared what little they had." Ellis listened in absolute silence, his face a mask of restrained emotions. "Maria was the kindest. She gave me a blanket, her only extra one. She said I looked like a lost lady. That's how she described me. Willa felt her eyes fill with tears at the memory. What bothered me most was not remembering my name. They started calling me Anne because I said I thought it started with an E-A-E. A tear ran down her cheek and she quickly wiped it away. I was hungry, cold, scared. But they looked after me when I needed it most. We formed a sort of makeshift family. The pain on Ellis's face was almost unbearable to witness. He reached out a hand, hesitant, as if wanting to touch Willa's face but unsure if he could. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice choked. "While I was here, in our home, with our things, you were surviving," Willa completed softly. "It's what we do, isn't it? We survive what life throws at us." Ellis lowered his head, his hands clenched into fists on his knees. "I should have searched more, questioned things, something, anything." "How could you have known?" Willa insisted. "They told me there was a body, that you identified it." "It was you," Ellis said, his voice low and intense. "Or it looked like you. The crash was horrific, the car, it was unrecognizable, and the body—" He trailed off, unable to continue. "So how could I be alive?" Willa asked the question that had been hanging between them since her return. Ellis shook his head, confused. "I don't know, that's what I've been trying to figure out for the past 2 weeks. I've been talking to the police, to medical examiners. No one has a clear answer yet." Willa nodded, processing the information. "How did I end up in Millfield, hundreds of miles away? How did I survive a crash that supposedly killed me? None of it makes sense." "We'll find out," Ellis promised, finally taking her hand in his. Together, the touch was comforting, grounding. Willa looked at their joined hands, feeling a connection that went beyond memory. "How did you get here?" Ellis asked after a moment. "From Millfield to our city?" "I just moved. From town to town, hitchhiking when I could, walking when I had to. I worked odd jobs here and there, washing dishes, cleaning yards, and whatever I could find." Willa paused, recalling the journey. "I don't know what brought me in this direction. Maybe some part of me knew, even subconsciously, that this was where I was supposed to go." Ellis squeezed her hand lightly. "I'm so grateful you found your way back." They looked at each other for a long moment, something deep and unnameable passing between them. It wasn't exactly the love they had shared before. How could it be, when Willa didn't remember? But there was something there, a connection, a mutual understanding that, despite everything, they still belonged to each other in some way. "Thank you," Willa said finally, "for taking me back, for giving me time, for not demanding that I be someone I can't yet remember how to be." Ellis shook his head, his eyes shining with restrained emotion. "You are always welcome here, always. This is your home, with or without memories." That night, after such an emotionally charged conversation, Willa lay in her bed, the guest room Ellis had insisted she occupy, giving her space. Despite the emotional exhaustion, sleep was slow to come. Her mind was filled with fragmented images, nameless faces, bodiless voices. When she finally fell asleep, the dreams came, intense and vivid. She was driving. The night was dark, the road barely lit ahead. Her fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly, her knuckles were white. Her heart was racing, fear running through her veins like liquid ice. "I have to get home. I have to get to Juny." The headlights of a car behind her, too close, flashing. Someone honking insistently. He found me. How did he find me? She sped up, the engine protesting. Rain began to fall, the windshield wipers moving frantically. A face in the rearview mirror. A face she knew, a face she feared. "You can't run, Willa. You know too much." The voice seemed to be inside the car with her, though she knew it was impossible. The fear suffocated her, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. A sharp curve appearing suddenly, the wheels slipping from her hands, the scream trapped in her throat, the world spinning, shattering glass, twisting metal. Willa woke up with a choked scream, sitting bolt upright in bed. Her entire body was trembling, cold sweat trickling down her back. For a moment, she was disoriented, not recognizing the room around her. The door flew open suddenly. Ellis was there, his face alarmed, wearing only pajama pants. "Willa, are you okay?" He approached cautiously, turning on the lamp beside the bed. "I heard you scream." She couldn't speak. The images from the dream, no, the memory was still too vivid, the terror still too real. Her body trembled uncontrollably. Ellis sat on the edge of the bed, keeping a respectful distance, but close enough to offer comfort. "Was it a nightmare?" he asked gently. Willa shook her head, trying to find her voice. "Not just a nightmare. A memory, I think." Ellis waited patiently as she regained her composure, taking several deep breaths. "I was driving," she finally began, her voice trembling. "It was night, it was raining. I was so scared, Ellis, so scared." He frowned, concerned. "Of the accident?" "Not just of the accident. Of someone." Willa closed her eyes, trying to grasp the fleeting details of the dream. "Someone was following me, a man, I knew him, and I was afraid of him." Ellis became very still. "Do you remember who it was?" Willa pressed her temples, frustrated with the gaps in her memory. "I can't see the face clearly, but the voice was familiar. And he said—" She stopped, the phrase echoing in her mind, "You know too much." "What did he say, Willa?" Ellis pressed gently. "That I knew too much." She opened her eyes, meeting his. "Ellis, I don't think it was just an accident. I think someone was chasing me. Someone you knew, a former partner, maybe. Someone connected to you." Ellis's face turned visibly pale, even in the soft lamplight. A muscle worked in his jaw. "Michael," he murmured, almost to himself. "Who's Michael?" Willa asked, the name sending a shiver of recognition down her spine, though she couldn't connect it to a face. Ellis ran a hand through his hair, visibly disturbed. "Michael Garner. My former partner at the architecture firm. We had a serious falling out a few months before your accident." "What kind of falling out?" Ellis hesitated, as if weighing his words. "I found out he was embezzling funds from a major project. I confronted him, threatened to expose him. It was ugly. He threatened me, then tried to accuse me of the same crimes. And I knew about this," Willa asked, trying to connect the dots. "Yes. You were with me when I discovered the irregularities. In fact, you were the one who noticed it first, your background in accounting." Ellis stopped, realizing he was providing information she didn't remember. "Sorry. Yes, you knew. And he knew that you knew." A chill ran through Willa's body. "In the dream, the memory, I was trying to get home, get to Juny. I was desperate." Ellis took her hand, squeezing it gently. "What else do you remember?" "The curve, the car skidding, the world spinning." Willa took a deep, shaky breath. "After that, nothing. Just darkness." "Do you think—" Ellis started, then stopped, as if the idea was too terrible to put into words. "That he caused the accident? I don't know. Maybe." Willa looked at Ellis, the realization hitting her with full force. "But it would explain everything, wouldn't it? If he thought I died in the crash, he would have no reason to look further. And maybe the body. Maybe it wasn't meant to be me." The implication hung heavily between them. If the accident hadn't been an accident, but an attempt to silence her, then who was the person Ellis had identified as his wife? An innocent victim, in the wrong place at the wrong time. "We need to talk to the police," Ellis said finally, his voice firm despite the paleness of his face. "First thing tomorrow. This changes everything." Willa nodded, feeling simultaneously relieved to have recovered such a significant piece of her memory and terrified by the implications. If her theory was correct, she hadn't just suffered an accident and lost her memory. She had been the target of something far more sinister. "Do you think I'm still in danger?" she asked quietly. Ellis squeezed her hand tighter. "I don't know, but I won't let anything happen to you. Not ever again." Silence settled between them, heavy with all they had discovered and all they still didn't know. Willa looked at their joined hands, feeling the comforting warmth of his. "Can you stay?" she asked softly. "Just until I fall asleep again. I don't want to be alone right now." Ellis nodded, moving to sit beside her, his back against the headboard. Still holding her hand, he murmured, "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Willa lay back down, her head on the pillow, her eyes heavy with emotional exhaustion. She felt strangely calmer now, despite the disturbing revelations. There was something comforting in finally having a glimpse of the truth, however frightening it was. As she drifted off to sleep, still holding Ellis's hand, one thought persisted. The puzzle of her past was finally starting to take shape. But the emerging pieces revealed a picture far darker than anyone could have imagined. The visit to the police station had been exhausting. Hours of depositions, repetitive questions, skeptical looks from the detectives. The theory that Willa's accident might have been a deliberate attempt to silence her was met with professional caution. With no concrete proof beyond the fragmented memories of a woman with amnesia, the officers promised to investigate, but offered little hope. Michael Garner, Ellis's former partner, had left town over a year ago, shortly after Willa's supposed fatal accident. Coincidence or a calculated escape? The police were now trying to locate him, but the process would be slow. 3 days had passed since that night of revelations. Ellis had returned to work, though he was reluctant to leave Willa alone. He installed a new security system in the house and made frequent calls during the day to check on her. The worry was understandable, but Willa felt suffocated by the anxiety that now permeated the house. That Thursday afternoon, with Ellis at work and Juny at school, Willa decided to use the time alone to explore the house more deeply. Not as a cautious visitor, but as someone determined to reconnect with the space she had once called home. She started in the master bedroom, which Ellis still occupied alone. She felt a bit like an intruder opening drawers and closets, but the need to understand her past outweighed the discomfort. In the closet, she found a section of women's clothing, still untouched. Her dresses, blouses, pants neatly folded. Ellis had kept everything exactly as she had left it. Willa ran her fingers over the fabrics, hoping for a flash of memory, some emotional connection to these pieces she had supposedly chosen and worn. Nothing came but a vague sense of familiarity with a navy blue cardigan that she instinctively took off the hanger and put on over her t-shirt. In the office, she examined the bookshelf more closely. Many books had small sticky notes marking pages or passages. She recognized Ellis's handwriting, but there was also another, more rounded, more fluid. Her own, she presumed. This part reminded me of our first date. E. You have to read this chapter. Perfectly described. Their little conversations in the margins of books, a silent dialogue between two people who shared not just a house, but thoughts, observations, discoveries. In the kitchen, she opened every cabinet, every drawer, letting her fingers guide the way. She found she knew exactly where to find the perfect pan for scrambled eggs, though she couldn't remember ever cooking in that kitchen. Muscle memory, Dr. Chen had explained. The body remembers, even when the mind forgets. It was in the living room that she made the discovery. While examining a built-in cabinet behind photo albums and board games, Willa found a shoebox decorated with colorful stickers and glitter. Her name was written on the lid in carefully drawn childish letters, "For Mummy, Private." Willa took the box to the sofa, sitting with it on her lap. She hesitated before opening it, feeling she was about to witness something intensely personal. Carefully, she removed the lid. Inside, dozens of folded pieces of paper filled the box to the brim. Drawings, handmade cards, little notes written in colored pencil. Willa took the first paper from the top and unfolded it. It was a drawing of a woman with long hair holding the hand of a little girl. Red hearts floated around them. At the bottom, in clumsy letters, "To Mommy, with love, from Juny." Willa felt a lump in her throat as she picked up another paper. This one was a card made of blue construction paper, with cut-out stars glued on. Inside, Juny had written, "Dear Mommy, Today I got an A+ in math. I wanted to tell you, I hope you're proud. I love you so much." With slightly trembling hands, Willa continued to examine the contents of the box. Each paper told a little story. A moment, a thought that Juny had wanted to share with the mother she believed she had lost forever. "Mommy, today the sky was your favorite blue. I smelled you on your pillow today. Daddy said it was just my imagination, but I know it wasn't. I had a dream about you last night. We were making cookies. I was happy when I woke up. Then I was sad when I remembered." Silent tears began to stream down Willa's face as she read message after message. Some were happy, sharing achievements or fun moments. Others were devastatingly sad, revealing the depth of the little girl's pain. One drawing in particular made her pause. It showed a female figure among the clouds, looking down at a house where a girl and a man stood side by side, holding hands. Above the house, in large letters, "We miss you every day." That box was a diary of loss, a one-way channel of communication that Juny had created to cope with her mother's absence. It was as if, through those letters, the girl was keeping Willa alive, continuing the relationship even when she believed her mother existed only as a distant star in the sky, as she had once mentioned. Willa didn't know how long she sat there, absorbing these fragments of her daughter's soul. She was so engrossed in the letters that she didn't hear the front door open. "Mommy, what are you doing?" Willa looked up, surprised to see Juny standing in the living room entrance, backpack still on. She had been so focused she hadn't noticed the time. "Juny, She looked at the letters scattered around her, suddenly feeling guilty. "I found this box. I'm so sorry if I shouldn't have opened it." Juny approached slowly, her eyes fixed on the letters. She didn't seem angry, just hesitant. "They're my letters to you," she said simply. Willa nodded, wiping the tears from her face. "They're beautiful, Juny, all of them." The girl shrugged, but there was a vulnerability in her eyes that broke Willa's heart. "Did you write these all the time?" Willa asked softly, holding one of the most recent letters, dated just a month ago. Juny nodded, looking down at her own feet. "It was the only way I could talk to you." The simplicity of the statement, the raw and painful truth within it, hit Willa with devastating force. This child, deprived of her mother so early, had created a ritual to keep the connection alive, to continue the conversation even when she believed there was no one on the other end to listen. Without thinking, Willa opened her arms. Juny hesitated for only a second before moving forward and letting herself be enveloped in a tight hug. Willa felt her daughter's small body tremble against hers, and she realized they were both crying silently. No words were needed in that moment. The hug said everything, the shared grief for lost time, the relief of being together again, the fragility of the connection they were rebuilding day by day. When they finally separated, Willa kept her hands on Juny's shoulders, looking her in the eyes. "Thank you," she said, her voice choked. "For what?" Juny asked, wiping her tears with her coat sleeve. "For not giving up, for keeping talking to me, even when you thought I couldn't hear you." A small smile appeared on Juny's face. "Daddy said the people we love never really leave us, that there's always a connection." "Your dad is a wise man," Willa replied, feeling a wave of gratitude for Ellis, for how gently he had helped Juny process her loss. Juny looked at the letters spread across the sofa. "You can keep them if you want. Now that you're really here, I don't need to write anymore." Willa felt her eyes well up again. "I will treasure all of them. But you know what? I think you should keep writing." "Why? You're here now." "Yes, I am. But writing is a special way of talking. Sometimes we say things on paper that we can't say out loud." Willa picked up one of the letters, a colorful drawing of two figures holding hands under a rainbow. "And I'd love to write back to you." Juny's eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and hope. "Really? Really? We can have our own little mailbox." "How about that?" Juny's smile broadened, lighting up her entire face. "Can I start today? I have so many things to tell you." "Of course, you can. But first, how about a snack? You must be hungry after school." As they made sandwiches together in the kitchen, Willa noticed Juny seemed lighter, more animated. It was as if the discovery of the letters, instead of being an invasion of privacy, had been a relief. Finally, her words, kept for so long in a silent box, had found their destination. That evening, while helping Juny with her homework, Willa noticed the girl seemed pale and restless. "Are you okay, sweetie?" she asked, touching her daughter's forehead with the back of her hand. "You feel warm." Juny nodded, but her eyes looked tired. "My throat hurts a little." Without a second thought, Willa sprang into action. She sent Juny to bed, got the thermometer from the bathroom drawer, knowing exactly where it was, though she didn't remember ever using it, and made tea with honey and lemon in the exact proportion her hands somehow seemed to know. She sat on the edge of the bed, placing a cool compress on her daughter's forehead while she sipped the tea in small gulps. "So you do it just like before," Juny commented, her voice hoarse. "The tea is perfect," Willa smiled, adjusting the blankets around the girl. "It seems some things the body doesn't forget." Juny watched her with those large, perceptive eyes that seemed to see far more than a child normally would. "I think you're remembering me, Mommy," she said softly, her voice heavy with sleep and fever, "even if you don't know it yet." The words, so simple and so profound, touched something deep inside Willa. Maybe Juny was right. Maybe, beyond the conscious memories, beyond the flashes and glimpses that occasionally surfaced, there was a deeper kind of remembering, the kind etched not in the mind, but in the heart. As Juny fell asleep under her care, Willa remained seated beside her, the letters from the box echoing in her mind. All those words she couldn't hear, all those messages sent into the void. And now, finally, she was here to listen, to answer. The silence had been broken. The voices, Juny's in her letters, Willa's in her instinctive care, were finally meeting in a dialogue that transcended words and memories. 2 weeks had passed since Juny's fever. The sore throat had quickly subsided under Willa's meticulous care, which surprised everyone, especially herself, with the naturalness with which she assumed the maternal role, even without concrete memories to guide her. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon. Ellis had gone to the office to handle some pending matters, promising to be back for dinner. Willa and Juny were taking advantage of the time alone to organize the girl's room, a project the girl had suggested with clear enthusiasm. "Should we start with the closet or the toy chest?" Willa asked, observing the colorful room that, despite being reasonably organized, showed clear signs of belonging to an 8-year-old with more interests than space to accommodate them. "Tie the chest," Juny decided promptly. "There's a lot of stuff I don't even use anymore. We can sort it for donation." Willa smiled, touched by the girl's generosity. Together, they pulled the large, painted wooden chest to the center of the room and opened the lid. Inside, years of childhood were preserved in layers, newer toys on top, relics of a younger Juny settled at the bottom. Methodically, they began to empty the contents, creating piles: keep, donate, repair. Juny narrated stories for each significant item: the doll she got for her 6th birthday, the stuffed dinosaur that accompanied her to every doctor's appointment, the kaleidoscope Ellis brought back from a business trip. At the bottom of the chest, among colorful wooden blocks and miniature cars, Willa found a small dark blue velvet box, the kind that usually holds jewelry. "What's this?" she asked, picking up the small box. Juny, who was organizing coloring books, turned quickly. Something in her expression changed, a flash of apprehension, followed by a seriousness unusual for her age. "It's yours," she said simply, approaching. Willa frowned, confused, and slowly opened the box. Inside rested a delicate silver pendant in the shape of a tree of life, suspended on a thin chain. The piece sparkled under the sunlight, streaming through the window. "It's beautiful," Willa commented, taking it out of the box. The weight of the object in her hand was curiously familiar. "Why is it in your toy chest?" Juny bit her lower lip. "I took it from your jewelry box after you were gone," she confessed. "Dad doesn't know. You used to wear it every single day." Willa held the pendant by its chain, watching it spin slowly, capturing and reflecting the light. There was something profoundly familiar about the object, beyond its intrinsic beauty. The specific weight against her palm, the pattern of the delicately crafted branches in the silver. It was then that it happened. Like a bolt from the blue, the first memory hit her with full force. Ellis smiling nervously, holding out a small package. "Happy 5th wedding anniversary, my love." Her own fingers unwrapping the gift, the surprise and joy upon seeing the pendant for the first time. "Ellis, it's perfect, a tree of life. For our little family," he completed, helping her put on the chain. "There are 3 main branches. You taught me and Juny." The memory was so vivid that Willa could smell the perfume she was wearing that night, hear the soft music playing in the background, feel the gentle touch of Ellis's fingers on her neck. Another memory immediately followed. Juny, smaller, maybe 5 years old, sitting on her lap during a thunderstorm. Little fingers playing with the pendant as Willa tried to distract her from the thunder. "Why do you wear this every day, Mommy?" "Because it reminds me that we're always connected, even when we're apart. Like the roots of this tree, our family is always together no matter what." Willa gasped, her free hand flying to her chest. The memories were no longer coming as isolated flashes, but as an uncontrollable flood. A floodgate had opened in her mind, and now everything, absolutely everything, was returning at once. The day she met Ellis in the college library, literally tripping over his feet. Their first kiss in the rain on campus. The clumsy marriage proposal during a picnic that was cut short by a downpour. The discovery of her pregnancy, the mix of fear and joy, the birth of Juny after 18 hours of labor. First steps, first words, first days of school. Entire years of life unfolded in her mind like the pages of a book being flipped at high speed, yet with every detail perfectly clear. Every Christmas, every birthday, every argument and reconciliation, every mundane and extraordinary moment she had shared with her family, and then the final memories, the discovery of the fraud at the firm, Ellis confronting Michael, the growing threats, the fear, the decision to take Juny to her grandmother's house until everything settled down, the chase on the rainy road, the crash. The impact of the memories was as physical as it was emotional. Willa didn't realize she had fallen to her knees on the rug, still clutching the pendant tightly, tears streaming freely down her face. Her entire body trembled. "Mommy!" Juny's worried voice brought her partially back to the present. The girl was kneeling beside her, her eyes wide with alarm. "Are you okay? Do you want me to call Dad?" Willa looked at her daughter, and now she truly saw her for the first time since her return. Not as a child she needed to get to know, but as the extension of her own heart, the small being she had carried, loved, and protected from the very first moment. "Juny," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "My Juniper Ellis Thompson." The girl's eyes widened even more, a gradual understanding dawning on her face, followed by a hope so intense it was almost painful to witness. You remembered?" Juny asked in a thread of a voice. Willa nodded, unable to speak for a moment, more tears overflowing. She opened her arms and Juny threw herself into them, sobbing against her chest. "I remember everything, my love," Willa finally managed to say, holding her daughter close. "You, Dad, our life." They stayed like that for a long time, embracing on the floor of the room, surrounded by toys, crying together, tears of relief, of joy, of grief for the lost time they could never get back. When they finally separated, Juny looked at the pendant still in Willa's hand, her eyes red and swollen. "I kept that pendant with me because it was your favorite," she said, her voice hoarse. "I thought that way you were close to me." Willa felt her heart tighten with a new wave of emotion. "You remembered what I always said about it." Juny nodded, a small smile appearing through her tears. "That we're always connected, even when we're apart. Like the roots of a tree," Willa completed, caressing her daughter's face. "Can I put it on you now?" Juny asked shyly, "so it can come home too?" "I would love that." With small but determined hands, Juny took the pendant and, concentrating intensely, managed to fasten the delicate clasp around Willa's neck. The familiar weight against her chest was like the final piece clicking into the puzzle of her identity. Ellis came home earlier than he had planned. Something in the tone of Juny's text message, "Come home quick, Dad. Something super important happened," had made him anxious. Over the past few months, he had learned to fear surprises. He opened the front door hurriedly, calling out for them. The sound of quick footsteps was followed by Willa appearing in the hallway. It took only one look for Ellis to know. There was something different about her. In her posture, her expression, the light in her eyes. It was no longer the gentle but distant gaze of the woman who had returned to them. It was Willa, his Willa, whole. "Ellis," she said, her name filled with recognition and love. "Willa," he replied, almost breathless, afraid to believe. She ran to him, throwing her arms around his neck. "I remember, Ellis. I remember everything. Us." Ellis felt his knees weaken. He hugged her tightly, burying his face in her hair. Tears he didn't even know he was holding back finally released. Juny joined them, wrapping her arms around their waists, forming a perfect circle, the family, complete again. Later, after they had explained everything, after they had called Dr. Chen to share the extraordinary news, after they had celebrated with an impromptu but festive dinner, Ellis and Willa found a moment alone on the porch. Juny had finally fallen asleep, but not before making Willa promise repeatedly that she would be there in the morning. "I still can't believe it," Ellis said softly, holding her hand. "After everything, I know," Willa replied, touching the pendant at her neck. "Sometimes the universe has strange ways of working." "I'm so sorry," he said, the guilt clear in his voice. "For not finding you sooner, for all those months you spent." Willa gently placed a finger on his lips. "No, Ellis. No more guilt. There was no way to know. You thought I was dead. You saw me dead. But it wasn't you," he insisted. "And how could you have known?" Willa held his face in her hands. "The important thing is that we found our way back to each other, against all odds." Ellis nodded, covering her hands with his. "We still have a lot to face. Michael led the legal process out, explaining to everyone. And we'll face it together," she affirmed simply, "like we always have." The next morning, after a night where they finally slept in the same room, there was no passion, just the comfort of being together again. Willa announced she wanted to take Juny to school. "Are you sure?" Ellis asked, concern evident on his face. "It's your first day, ho." "Absolutely," Willa smiled. "I want our life back, Ellis, starting now." So there they were, the three of them standing by the gate of the house, ready to go their separate ways. There was a momentary hesitation, a remnant of fear. What if something happened again? "We'll be back for lunch," Willa promised, recognizing the apprehension in his eyes. Ellis nodded, forcing himself to smile. "I'll be waiting." Juny held Willa's hand tightly as they walked down the sidewalk. Ellis remained at the gate, watching them, the two loves of his life, together again. Willa turned one last time, smiling at him, and in that smile was everything: understanding, forgiveness, love, a future. Ellis closed the gate and went inside, a genuine smile finally forming on his face. It wasn't a quick or easy restart. The road ahead would still be challenging: legal issues, psychological trauma, readjusting to a normal life. But it was a true beginning. Love had conquered time, pain, and forgetting. And that, Ellis knew as he prepared for a new day, was all that really mattered.